or to the computer. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. There is a, shoot, I'm going to put into the chat a link. Okay, this is the right link. Yeah. So this is September 20th, and we're going to be talking about a political campaign to the Fish and Game Commission. And I just shared with you is a link that is to our Tableau public site, where you can take a look at our data for the project in a more robust fashion than you're probably used to. Take a look at that as you go through. I'm going to go a little bit over the backstory, since there's some new people here that may not be familiar, and we'll get right into it here. So my name is Keith Rutzar. I am a conservationist and a dive master and the executive director of the California Kelp Restoration Corps, which is a California nonprofit. And I advocate for life in the ocean. I'm a dive master for 9 years now, and training citizen science divers and pushing divers in the water from the boats. I'm also a licensed general contractor, and I work for Salas O'Brien Engineers in San Jose. So a little of the backstory is that kelp needs cold, nutrient-rich water. And when there was less kelp debris drifting into the cracks where urchins normally live, the urchins ran out of food. They came out of the cracks and moved into the kelp forest. The urchins began eating the holdfast where the kelp is attached to the reef, and the entire reef rips up and ends up washing onto the beach. In less than 3 years, many pristine kelp forests in Monterey went from this kelp forest to this urchin barren. And now we have an extension urchin barrens throughout the southern Monterey Bay and down through Big Sur further south. Around the peninsula, there are about 800 hectares of urchin barrens on rocky reefs, and the urchins have spread. So before the marine heat wave, we had about 487 acres of kelp in South Monterey Bay. This is from Google Earth imagery. And now, this is in 2022, September of 2022, we have 58.3 acres remaining. And there's some here and over here, and this is our project out here at Tankers. So around the peninsula, there's 800 hectares, 2,000 acres of urchin barrens, and the urchin barrens have now spread south, wrecking the Big Sur coast along this section as well. But for the diver effort, we were watching the kelp forest turn into urchin barrens every winter, and realized we needed to petition the Fish and Game Commission. So in 2017, Bruce Watkins and I submitted to the Fish and Game Commission, and we were denied. Resubmitted in January of 2019, but that was also denied. And then resubmitted in 2020, but this time we brought a lot of people to come and speak. And that's what moved the needle. That's what made it work for us to get this amendment to call purple and red urchins at Tankers Reef. And it became legal for us to call these urchins for 3 years, beginning April 1st of 2021. That 3 years is going to come up because it's now getting to be at that time. We proposed an expansion in November of 21, and that was denied. And we also submitted a blueprint for kelp restoration, and that was denied out of hand. And we're trying to get a scientific collecting permit, and I'll explain a little more about that later. And that's been in a process for over 1.5 years, and we're still in the pre-application phase. So in 2020, we started the giant kelp restoration project at Tankers Reef by amending the sport fishing regulations to allow licensed recreational divers unlimited take of purple and red urchins by culling them with hammers. The goals of the project are to do this safely, train divers to cull urchins properly without harming other marine life, reduce purple and red urchin density below 2 per square meter in the treatment area, And the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Reef Check California monitor our work to see how well we are meeting these goals. The benefits of the project are to establish a giant kelp forest at Tankers Reef, provide a giant kelp spore bank for future kelp forest recovery, and monitor changes in the kelp forest community, and of course, to provide habitat for the southern sea otter. This red line is the enforcement boundary from the amendment. The site is divided into the control area, where no culling takes place, and the treatment area, where divers cull the urchins. The mustard color is where kelp has existed in the last 30 years. The green color is where we found kelp in April of 2021. The lime green box is the cable grid for navigation by the culling divers and for the scientific monitoring of the divers. The divers also monitor an area out here in the control grid, so they can compare the treatment area versus the control area to see what the differences are. Our method of doing this, there are two methods. On the grid, the divers go down these assigned lanes and call the urchins, recording how much area they've covered, how many urchins they've culled, and how much time was spent doing that effort. On the buoy, the divers first travel down a cable to an assigned starting point and go perpendicularly. And that's how it is on the orange buoy. They go down this cable, they find the letter, and they go perpendicular to that in an imaginary lane in a general heading east or west. So this is what it looks like. Urchins eating a holdfast from the inside out. That they live in the holes they have created in the shale by wiggling back and forth and waiting for the kelp to drift nearby, and then they grab it and eat it. Let me show you some maps here of what this looks like. So when we first started in 2021, a 6-acre kelp forest formed just north of our 2.5-acre grid in the treatment area, which is right here. So you got 2.5 acres here, here's 6 acres of the kelp forest. And then we watched, there was 8 acres is how it grew up, because we were going around this kelp forest and improving its size by culling the urchins as they tried to invade the kelp forest, and it grew outwardly. And then in September of 2021, we had to turn our attention to the grid, because that was where the divers were going to come and do the monitoring. So at the end of September, by Labor Day, we had worked this area down to below the threshold density to satisfy the joint agency recommendations. And then also a new kelp forest formed over here. So what was happening was this was adult and reproductive, and the spores from that kelp were coming into form a new kelp forest closer to shore. In October of 2021, we were trying to maintain the grid, but we couldn't defend the kelp out in this area anymore. So, and also the ocean heated up to over 60 degrees for 3 months, and the urchins just reinvaded the space. The kelp didn't do very well, lost its leaves, and the urchins just came in and started eating it. And in November of 21, it got smaller. We would patrol around this kelp forest with a GPS device, and we watched it as it shrunk from the urchins. But the new kelp forest was still forming down here. And this is what happened by April of 2022. It had settled out to be 8 acres of kelp forest closer to shore, and an 1.5 acres that was around our main mooring buoy over here on the grid. And we worked all winter. We defended the kelp in this new location all throughout the wintertime. We were able to go there. Now, in November of 2022, this is kind of how it settled out. The urchins were out here. There was some kelp that formed over here, and then it was eaten. These areas infilled, and the kelp forest was now 11 acres, and it was contiguous over this entire area. But then we got some weather, and no one could go out there for about 6 months. There was just windy all the time. And so we didn't really get out there till June. And when we came out there, the urchins had reinvaded this space on this side. They're coming in from this direction, and they ate the kelp on the western part of the grid. And then we moved the gray buoy over here. But this kelp seemed to persevere. And we actually had some kelp growing out here that where we hadn't called any urchins, but that the kelp just kind of grew. Maybe the urchins had come from there into the kelp forest to their demise. So kind of in summary, what had happened was that this is the hat is the area of the extent of our culling, which is 25 acres. On the grid, the kelp formed here. But in 2021, the kelp was out here where the blue color is. That's where the kelp was. And then by 2022, the kelp was this brown color over here. And then in 2023, we're seeing some kelp form over here in this area. And actually today, we were out there and we saw the Monterey Abalone Company harvesting this kelp out in this area. So it's been productive out here with the urchins that probably have moved from there towards our main kelp forest. And we have a drone overflight area. It's this red square, but I have removed those slides for the sake of being quicker here. So this is the monitoring and results. This is a little bit old. We first started out using Google Sheets, and we have 224 divers certified in kelp restoration, and they called 686,000 urchins in 1,400 dives. You can see that at first the numbers kind of grew quickly as we were finding lots of urchins, and then it kind of tapered off. We had some weather, and then our slope kind of slowed down as people were getting less and less urchins on the grid, and they became harder to find. So this is our Tableau work page, and I sent you the link to this. That's in the chat. You can go there and look at the details. You can see how many urchins we've called over time. And you can see, for instance, that the green is the area where we were calling on the grid, and the gray is where we were not calling on the grid in other places. And you can actually toggle on the sheet what you're interested in. You can also look at divers by their names. There's an abbreviation of the names, or by different locations, different buoys, and see what is the work rate and what is the catch per unit of effort. I'm going to turn it right. I can. Yeah. So this is how it is here. And there's another page to this as well, which is the engagement tab. So here's the number of urchinators that are registered. We have a discrepancy here. Total number of divers is 206 divers. 1,448 dives. This was updated on September 6th. And we've passed over the grid 8.6 times during the last 2.5 years. You add up all the area that the divers have covered, that's how many times we went over it in that amount of time. Right? Pull that back out there. So this is the results from Reef Check. This is through September of 2022. There's been now 6 surveys done on the site. The restoration, the urchins came down. We're trying to get below 2. We got below 2 on the restoration area. And then this is the kelp. And the kelp went up on the treatment site. On the control, there's like one scared bit of kelp there. And that's it there. So this is the kind of graph you want, right? This is cause and effect. The urchins were removed and the kelp did really well. Our next proposed sites are these green areas in Monterey and Carmel Bays. I'm going to show them. Here's Stillwater Cove and Stewart's Cove. These areas of our initial culling efforts is insignificant to the overall size of the 3 state marine conservation areas. Oops, sorry. So this is only 1.37% of the entire conservation area, but our goal is eventually to do the entire conservation area. This is a blow-up detail of the breakwater and where we tend to go there. The breakwater wall is a very productive place. There's kelp on it right now, and there's kelp on Middle Reef now. And our goal is to go and remove those urchins and keep them off of these areas within this green boundary here. Otter Cove, we have done some recon over here. There's a reef check site as well. There's lots of baseline information. Here's our boundary of our scientific collecting permit, which is this kidney-shaped bit of kelp. There are 12 sea otters that reside on that kelp, and they are keeping it alive. This other information here is our previous project, which is at Lovers Cove. And we had 20 patch reefs, and we maintained them for 3 years to try and see what is that threshold density. What is it really 2 urchins per square meter? Turns out it's actually much lower. It's about 0.6 urchins per square meter, and kelp will naturally recruit. This is Stillwater Cove. And Stillwater Cove, we're trying to, there's a site over here where there's 2 kelp patches. One of them is on sand, one of them is on rock. And there's urchins in this one, and not so much on that one. And the control site for it is, you have to have control always, is out here at what's called Dolly's Wall. It's deeper out here, and this is transitioned from a giant kelp forest to now a bull kelp forest. And our 4th site is in Carmel Bay. This is at Stewart's Point. You're probably familiar with Butterfly House up here. A little more, you come out over this way, and this is a ways down the coast. Access from shore is kind of limited. There is a stairway that comes down here from parking up above. Someone was just telling me the other day it's kind of rickety. Maybe something that's not even passable at this point. So we're gonna have to take a closer look at that. Well, that's with the scientific collecting permit. So we're trying to get that as being an experiment. And experiments have issues because it's hard to, once you get in the water, you realize you need to do something different, and it's hard to change them. And then after 3 years, they're over, and then you're not allowed to do anything at that point. So it becomes a problem. We want to have kelp restoration that goes on and on. So in that respect, our goal in the future is with ourselves and Reef Check to do a broader approach to this kind of work, which means culling urchins, as we've been doing with the volunteer divers, also baiting and trapping urchins with little crab pots out on the reef. It's kind of silly that we have to chase them around. We should just bait them like fishermen do. Also commercial harvest of urchins by commercial divers. The larger urchins can be put into ranching when they're 4.5 to 5 centimeters in size and larger, and they can be rehabilitated by feeding them agricultural waste and kelp, and be a marketable product for humans to eat. So that's a whole different regenerative fishery approach. And also we want to manage acid weed. Acid weed has come everywhere where the kelp goes. It disappears. This acid weed is an annual, and it forms in that sunlight. And I put some of it in a bucket, and 2 days later, it had a pH of 2.6. It has sulfuric acid in the tissues, and it is detrimental to urchins because when they eat it, it dissolves their teeth, which is good. But it's also detrimental because it wraps around kelp and chokes off the kelp as well from that acid. We want to remove invasive species. We're finding more and more invasive species on the sites. We're looking out for sargassum. We haven't seen any forming, luckily, knock on wood. And there's also an invasive bryozoan called water cypera, and it's taken over a lot of real estate, and we have to determine whether that's something we need to remove or not. Kelp planting and transplantings, right? So we can take kelp, if we could find it on the beach, you can put it back in the water, or we can take the spores from adult kelp, put them in goodie bags, put them out there in sporified bags on our cold areas, and have kelp grow. And we want to manage the kelp canopy by cutting the kelp canopy, like the Monterey Abalone Company is coming out, and they cut the kelp canopy. That turns out that's a natural process for kelp. And when that is removed, it helps it to survive storms better by not having that the wave pressure tugging on the kelp, and it adds more sunlight to the kelp as well, making it flourish. And when you cut the kelp, it just sends up another stipe, and that's how you get a lot of stipes on kelp, is by having that kelp canopy cut. And we also want to prohibit the fishing in the restoration areas. We have a lot of fishing pressure, and we can't tell whether, fish are a functioning part of the ecosystem. So we want to be able to keep the fish we have alive in our areas. So our plan for June of this year was to keep expanding out from what we had remaining here, and just keep pushing out into this deeper water back to where the orange buoy is, and kind of make this grow. And by making this grow, we stop the urchins from reinvading and reoccupying space over here. And this is turning out as an El Nino forecast. This is going to be a hot year, and hot years are not good for kelp. Kelp likes cold, nutrient-rich water, and that warm water is detrimental to it. So what happened was, we were going to continue this, and our ask of the commission was to extend this for another 3 years or whatever. It was set up as a 3-year project because that's the way Fish and Game operates. But then when that time was coming due, they said, oh, well, let's just sunset it. And we did not want to sunset this project, because that would kill everything that we've done out here. We didn't get up at the crack of dawn to come out here and cull urchins just to make the kelp more, give kelp a benefit, have more kelp, and then have the urchins eat it. Then the urchins get more reproductive and spawn more. I didn't come out here to make more urchins. I came out here to make less, right? So sunsetting the project was never something we had really considered. The way it was set up was that if we did really well, then they would consider extending it. But without even really considering whether we had done well or not, they just said, well, just sunset it. So as a result of that, the department came up with 3 options for the project. At Casper Cove, which is also Replicate, in case you're listening to that, is that they got 5 years without any discussion. They're continuing for 5 years. But at Tankers Reef, the options are, number 1 is to sunset it, and that means we can never go back there. And number 2 is to form a new boundary 100 meters away, which is a long way, just so that our work here doesn't influence this area of the grid. And the third option is to just extend it for 5 years. So what that would mean for the project in terms of kelp and urchins is that it would look something like this. Like, this is the present day situations, and we are abandoning the grid. We're no longer culling over here on the grid. We have moved our effort to the east. So we're working off the gray buoy and off the orange buoy right now, culling in these areas and protecting this kelp forest. And it's working pretty well, actually, because we got rid of a lot of urchins, and now we're even seeing new recruits along these lines here. There's a ledge right along here, and it's doing really well. But that's but the option, we're trying to get it to go, kelp go that way into our proposed this option 2 boundary, because we have to consider that could be what the Fish and Game Commission decides. So as a safety measure, we have to go that way. And then, so their decision is pending on this of what they want to do. So we're trying to do is make the kelp go in this direction and extend over top of the orange boundary, and achieve this by the end of the year. So if the option 1 is selected, urchins are just going to eat everything. We know this. We've already seen it happen twice on the project. When you go outside of the grid, there is a seemingly infinite supply of urchins that are coming into this place. So that would be what happens to option 1. If option 2, and we have a new boundary 100 meters away, then by April of 2024, we'll have a new kelp forest formed over here, and we'll defend over there, this new place, and we won't be allowed to come here anymore. We will have to stay on this side in this kelp forest. That's the compromise option, right? And the third option is if you just were to extend it for 5 years, we wouldn't get a decision until later in the year, in probably February, of what they decide to do, whether they're going to, which of the three options to choose. But by that time, we would hope that we could come back and defend this kelp in this area and try and keep what remains alive in this area for the next 5 years. The reason why they say 5 years is because there's other measures being done by the Kelp Restoration Management Plan with the Ocean Protection Council that will set up a real management plan for kelp restoration, and that won't occur until 5 years from now. So we need your help. There's 3 ways that you can help, and we hope that you will. The first one, the easiest one, these are in increasing level of difficulty, as it were, is email the Fish and Game Commission by Friday, September 29th. I want you to send your email to me. Some of you have already. And send that email with your very simple information, your name, your affiliation, and what do you love about the ocean. Just tell them what you like. You know, I've been a scuba diver for so long. I've seen the kelp. I've seen it get destroyed. I love the kelp. I love everything in it, and I want to keep that alive. And so it's important. There's hundreds of species in the kelp forest, and I like to surf and swim, or I like to see sea lions or sail. Whatever you like to do in the ocean, tell them about that in your letter. You can make it as short or as long as you like. And in the last paragraph of that, please support option 3, which is to extend Tankers Reef for 5 years and protect the kelp forest at Tankers Reef. And this will help to feed the sea otters. The sea otters are a threatened species. They're threatened. There's 2 sea otters at Tankers Reef all the time, and we are helping to keep them alive and giving them food. And we also, like I said, through our scientific collecting permit, we want to expand to more areas. So if you can ask them that, I say send it to me because the Fish and Game Commission staff doesn't want to be inundated with a lot of letters. So we are putting them all together in a common PDF and sending it to them. And the Fish and Game Commissioners have assured us that they read all of it. So please, that's a great way to do it. The next thing you can do, and you can do all 3 of these, you can do that first one and one of the next 2, let me put it that way to you, is to zoom into the Fish and Game Commission. You can do that from wherever you are. Just zoom in. I'll send you the instructions how to do it. Just email me at action@g2kr.com, and that you want to zoom into the meeting. And what we'll do is, because we don't know when the agenda item for this will come up in the meeting, it will most likely be in the afternoon, but we don't know when. So we'll monitor it and see when we think that it's going to come up on the agenda, and we will email everybody. Or if you give us your phone number, we will send you a text message telling you, hey, it's coming up. Turn on your Zoom, come into the meeting. Okay. So when you do come in to the Zoom call, with this agenda item is first mentioned, and we'll tell you what agenda item number it is. When it first comes in, you have to raise your hand, and they are really strange about it. You have to raise your hand in the first 3 minutes of when the agenda item is announced, and after 3 minutes they close it, and then you're too late to be able to comment. And then they take the people that raise their hand, they put them in order, in no particular order, and when your name is called, you're unmuted. And it's kind of strange because you're sitting there and they'll say who's next, and then they'll say, oh, Terry Feinberg, go ahead. And then you're on, and it doesn't really, you can't really tell you're on. You're just unmuted. And all of a sudden, and a lot of people go, am I on? But you're really on. And so to go ahead and take your time, there's a timer on the screen, and they'll give you 2 minutes. There's an asterisk next to this one because the chair may go, oh, well, it's 3 minutes. Or the chair could say, oh, it's only 1 minute. But it's usually 1, 2, or 3 minutes of public comment. So to be aware of that, they may reduce the time, but be prepared to speak for 2 minutes. And when you do your speech on Zoom, give your presentation, Give them your name, if your affiliation, like what you do, I'm a diver or whatever like that, or if you're with a dive shop or you're with UC Santa Cruz or whatever you're with, and give them that, and then explain why is kelp important to you. And then support option 3 to extend Tankers Reef for 5 years and to expand to more areas. And make sure you email to me, so you, otherwise you, I mean, you can listen to the whole meeting, but it's pretty boring. You know, they're talking about grunion and crazy things. So avoid that. Just give us your information and we will make sure and alert you in time to raise your hand. The other thing that you can do, and this is to come to the Fish and Game Commission meeting. It's in San Jose, which is great because usually they're far away. The last one was up in Fortuna, which is like a 6-hour drive. Right? Nobody showed up, but it's in San Jose at the Scottish Rite Center. The same thing, if you can email to us at Action and with your phone number. Oops, sorry. Oops, where did I go? This one. So they will notify you like ahead of time so you can drive there. We'll give you some notice, you know, when we think it's going to be, we'll give an estimated time, and we'll keep everybody updated this way. So you don't have to sit there in this meeting all day and listen to stories about trawling and people wanting to kill more things. And then you have 2 minutes, right? Again, this can be modified by the chair. And then submit, when you first get there at the meeting place, there'll be a big assembly hall, there'll be the commissioners there, and there'll be a podium there, and there's seats. There are comment cards by the door. Pick up a comment card. You're going to fill out there. I want to speak on agenda item, and I'll tell you what the agenda item is, and give it to staff. That's there. And that way, when that agenda item comes up, they take the comment cards for that agenda item and they read off everybody in order, and then you line up behind the podium in no particular order, and you do your presentation, your little speech, right? So when you do that, you're going to want to give them the same information: your name, affiliation, why kelp is important, support Tankers Reef, and expand to more areas. Right? Little notes about what to say, right? So prepare your statement when you're going to these meetings. Don't try to just kind of wing it. You know, you can, but you'll be a lot more effective if you've prepared something and you've rehearsed it. Write it down and edit it, right? Make sure you get the most use of your words, right, that you want to say. You made the effort to come to the meeting, now make it count, right? It's very compelling when a person is there saying it to them, right? That's the most effective way to get your message across. So practice saying it out loud and time it, and make sure that you can say everything you want to say in 2 minutes. And if you think you're going over, you're like 2 minutes and 15 seconds or something, then try to go through and kill some of your babies, right? Like go there and take out some paragraphs or whatever and shorten it up to 2 minutes, right? And the other thing is the chair, President Sklar, may say, oh, it's only 1 minute, right? And now you got a 2-minute speech and 1 minute to do it, right? Now you got a problem, right? So what I do, and this is what the good lobbyist people do, is you highlight in there the things that you could throw out if you only got 1 minute, right? Just put a highlighter on it. So you do your whole speech, and then if he says 1 minute, then you're just not reading the highlighted parts, and it all works out. It's 1 minute, you know what I mean? If you go over a little bit, you know, they're not going to buzz you, you know what I mean? But you don't want to be like, no, it's a 1 minute thing and you're going on for, you know, and they'll just stop you eventually from talking, right? So don't do that. And then what to say in your speech is that, you know, just be honest about your experiences. You know, I'm not trying to tell you what to say, but they want testimony from people. I mean, you're in this area, you're divers, you like life in the ocean, and so, you know, just tell them about what you saw. You know, I was in here, and it's changed over time. Whatever your experience is, tell them about that. They need to know that, because they don't know that. These are people that they don't go on the ocean. They're not divers. They go on boats maybe, right? So they don't have the experiences that you have. And then tell them what it feels like. It's better to be, don't cry or anything, but tell them how important it is to you, and show some emotion about it. Show them no one's going to consider that what you're saying important unless you consider it important. So also be reasonable, right? Like don't be hyperbolic. There's some people that come and they're like, oh, there's like 40,000 divers and all this kind of stuff. And as soon as you try and kind of throw out numbers that you don't feel confident about, say like, oh, I don't know, it's like this. It's like, don't even say that, right? Like there's no reason to be hyperbolic about the situation. It's hyperbolic enough all by itself, right? Be positive, right? Try to keep negative words out of it if you can, right? Say it's not like this, it's not like that. Like tell them what you love about it, right? Like it's a positive effect. We're going there, we're doing this thing, and there's all this kelp that came back, and it's growing, and we love this, and we want to do more of it, and be positive in your words, right? Nobody wants to come out and, oh, these guys are sour grapes, you're just throwing up red flags if you start to be negative about it, and don't blame them. Like it's really, I mean, they are a problem, they are frustrating to deal with, but as soon as you start saying, oh, it's your fault, you're doing this, it just makes them defensive. And that way you're just taking your own message and wrecking your own message when you do that, right? So you want to be positive and try to get them, you're not going to change their mind, but maybe they'll come to your side if you're positive about what you believe in. And some of the things that I would say are the buzzwords and things that should be common threads throughout all of these speeches is to let the volunteer divers do the work. And the divers can do this safely without bycatch, right? That's a key thing, is without the bycatch. And to keep the momentum of the diver effort, right? We're building momentum. We're just as we are today, we're this way, but in the future, we'll be much larger, right? This is a growing enterprise, and we can do more things, right? Another key buzzword is to say, don't play games with kelp, because a lot of what they're trying to do is scientific endeavors and try to like, let's study it and do these things and kill kelp, right? That's what that compromise is all about, is to kill it off to see if it'll be persistent if the divers stop, right? That's playing games with it, right? They want to could say it's a scientific design. It's not. It's just, that's playing games, because we have a kelp shortage, right? There's not surplus kelp to just let die. And kelp restoration is the goal, and not the scientific design. That's our goal. Like we all came out here to do kelp restoration, right? We didn't come out here to do a temporary experiment and try to determine some sort of information about kelp and urchin dynamics. We came out here to actually make the kelp grow, and it worked. So there's that. Tanker's Reef was to be extended, and it wasn't considered temporary. They want to call it temporary now, but in none of the information that we had been leading into this was this considered temporary. It was considered to be that if we did this well, it would be extended, right? That's the through line, and they want to kind of reimagine this. That's not true. We have a document, and I can show that to you, but that's basically what it says. And culling the urchins is in order to meet the 6 goals of the marine protected areas. They are very reluctant to let us go into the marine protected areas. They like to believe that there is a 7th goal of the marine protected areas, which is to leave these areas undisturbed. But that is not a goal of the marine protected areas. There are 6 goals, and the goals of the marine protected areas is to protect and restore biodiversity. And that's what we're doing. So this is totally consistent with the goals. And that's why we should be doing these other restoration projects in marine protected areas, as I've said. And if you're there and you're listening to people and someone else says something good that you agree with, you can say that. You can say, I echo the comments of so-and-so. I agree with that person. And that helps to bolster, now you've doubled your effect of what you're saying by saying something else. And so when they're keeping score of how people feel, they can say, well, a lot of people feel like this. So you can say that. And it's always a good approach to say that I agree with what you said. And it's a good way to do it. So that's it. I'll go ahead and stop our recording if I can.